Welcome back to Varnadore Films. I am joined today by a very special guest. If you followed Florida football for any amount of time, you probably know my guest here, Thomas Goldkamp. Thomas, thanks for coming on and talking about the Gators with us here.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on. We were talking about it, before we got on. I've been following your work for a long time, and I think the same for you. So I'm excited to sit down and finally have a chat with you.
Yeah, I remember seeing you on like videos in Gator Country a long time ago. So not too
Yeah,
long ago.
it's been quite the ride.
Not too long ago. We won't say that. But I wanted to bring you on. There's been some, probably not in real life, but online. There's been some turmoil the last few weeks in the Florida fandom. Just wanted to bring you on as someone I think has been a pretty steady voice the past few years on in terms of the transition, the coaching transition that's happening, how that applies in different places. So I just want to start off. Florida does have a new football coach. I know you've given your thoughts elsewhere, but what are kind of your general thoughts on Napier and how you think he'll kind of navigate this transition?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to unpack there, but I think my early impressions of Billy Napier from covering the program through this spring, and kind of seeing how he attacked the early signing period and National Signing Day. I think Florida has a very organized coach, and I think that comes across in sort of everything he does. He's very structured, very detailed, very meticulous in a lot of ways that I think the program really needed. Now, obviously, there's some new challenges that he's dealing with in terms of the landscape, and I'm sure we'll talk about that some. But I think just generally, I think he's got a very clear vision of what he wants this program to be. And I think, at least for now, he seems to have the support of the administration to be able to go out and do the things that he wants to do in terms of hiring staff and all that. So, I think Florida's in a place where, he's going to have a chance to really kind of build towards that vision. And I think if you look back at what he did at Louisiana, it's pretty clear, I think, what that's going to look like.
Yeah. Do you think in my opinion, I don't know if you ever can truly understand what the job entails until you're in it. Do you think he truly understood? I know I believe he understood some of the challenges just based on what he's asked for and what he's received. But do you think you can understand what the job entails before you're actually in it?
I think probably you can understand a lot of it on paper. I think what you can't anticipate is just kind of the ferocity of it, when you're sitting in that seat. And I mean, I've covered, this is what was my fourth, I think, head coach at Florida. I mean, I got in, about 2 years left in the Urban Meyer era. So I've seen a bunch of coaches come through Florida. And the one thing that always sticks out is there's always a point where you hit this unexpected level of things ratcheting up. And so I don't think he'll get there for, hopefully a couple of years for Florida fans. But how you handle that, I think, is as important as anything. So, it's one thing to look at it on paper. It's another to go through it.
Is that just been something that you think has been accelerated by social media and message and all that? Because I know a few weeks ago you were kind of going through a thread of all the challenges that coaches had to overcome and didn't quite get over, or stuff that was kind of issues for them early. And it made me think about Urban Meyer. His first year, they lose to LSU. Everyone says his offense, everyone's got it figured out. And he cries in a post-game press conference after losing. If that happened today, like, he may not last for much longer. But to me, that's just a totally different era it seems like we're living in, because that just sprang to my head. And it was like, could you imagine if your coach broke down, cried in the middle of a press conference?
Yeah, it's definitely a different era. I have no idea. I won't claim to know how that might have gone, after year one for Urban. But I think the key point there is, what did Urban do, right? He was very introspective, took a hard look at the offense that he thought would come in and, kind of take the SEC by storm. And he went and changed things right away. He didn't wait. And I think that's the hallmark of a good coach, especially at a job like Florida. You have to be able to adapt quickly. And I think the last three coaches, for various reasons, probably failed because they didn't adjust quickly enough.
And it seems like all the qualities that were listed when Napier was hired, how kind of thoughtful he is, how organized he is, how meticulous and how detailed, you think that would be something he would understand he needs to do. It doesn't seem like he's going to be a stubborn guy. It seems like he's going to be one that would adjust to what's needed. Is that kind of the impression you got of him?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, Billy Napier is pretty open that one of the most formative points in his career was when he got fired at Clemson. So he's been through it, from the side of an assistant coach getting dumped by a coach that felt like he needed to make a change when the offense was kind of a little bit stagnant there, as I recall. And then he's been on the flip side where he's been at Alabama, where Nick Saban has churned through assistants, and so I think he should have a pretty good idea of, this is a job where you're going to have to make some hard decisions at some points.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It sounds weird, but it is somewhat, to me. I thought one of the more interesting parts of his career is that getting fired and coming back, because he started off, he was kind of a hotshot young coach, made his way and was kind of one of the big names, and then gets fired and is still able to make his way back. So it's also not one of those situations where a guy is just going to be like, I've always been successful this way. I'm just going to ride it through. So that was one of the things when they hired him I thought was interesting, is that background. So how, kind of just moving on just past Napier, how is this transition phase kind of compared to some of the other ones you've covered? I know there's in Mullins, it seemed to be a lot more positivity for longer. Is it just kind of is that the, because of previous failures, this one's get turned a little bit negative at times?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely part of it. I mean, it's definitely a unique transition period for Billy Napier, and not just him, but any coaches that are kind of walking into this new era of transfer portal and NIL and all that stuff. I do think you hit, a solid point there, that because Florida fans have now been through 3 head coaches who in various ways failed, differently.
Yeah.
I think Florida fans kind of know where some of those pain points are, some of those early warning signs from each of those 3 coaches. And so they're probably more acutely aware if things are maybe drifting off course a little bit early on. But I don't know. It's so hard right now to really evaluate Napier,
Yeah.
right? Like even the recruiting right now, it's people ask me, oh, is he getting the job done? Florida's class right now doesn't look necessarily great on paper, but it's like, we're in the first year of NIL playing a big factor in all these recruitments, and like, people are handling it differently. Some programs are out here throwing big money at individual targets. Some are, have that booster organization already fully set and ready to roll. And I think Florida, to a certain degree, is kind of grappling with what's the right way to go about it so it's sustainable, not just for this class and this year, but going forward. And so to me, it's just, I don't think there's any comps for this kind of transition yet. And
No,
so
I,
that's going to
I
make it tough.
agree. I agree. I think it's totally the context. And I feel like at times fans think that context is the same as an excuse. But I think context is relevant in terms of where he's coming from. He's coming from the G5 level. Florida's had a few coaches come from that level to varying degrees of success. But this is not the same kind of recruiting landscape when Urban Meyer came in, where he could kind of come in, run the state. First of all, the state of Florida is so much tougher recruited now than ever.
Entirely.
You've got behemoths at the top of the conference in Alabama, Georgia, and now Texas A&M, and that kind of leads into the NIL part of it, where it really seems like it's based on your interpretation of this one part of the rule of whether or not you're getting recruits and through that. It's a really, really weird time, and also it just turned to July, so there is some time.
Yeah.
There is some time to play some games and see how that kind of works. To that note, though, of the NIL and the recruiting, I think another piece of context is a lot of fans are looking down at Miami and seeing what they're doing with the new head coach. And I think that comparison, it may be a little bit tough. What are your thoughts kind of on that? Because it's come up in quite a few recruiting battles so far. It seems like the Miami, Florida kind of button heads.
Yeah. Well, first off, I would say I think Miami's had the upper hand for now against Florida in a lot of these head-to-head battles, and obviously it doesn't sit well with a lot of fans that follow recruiting very closely. But I think it goes to kind of what we were hitting at earlier, is people are going to have different philosophies on how to handle this, and there's going to be different circumstances. I mean, Miami seems to me very much driven by John Ruiz at the moment in terms of the NIL front. But look, Mario Cristobal is also just a really, really good recruiter.
Yes.
I mean, he's been a great recruiter everywhere he's gone. So I think you put those two things together, obviously it lends to some early success for Miami. And, they're kind of doing what I think Florida needs to do. Maybe not necessarily, in South Florida so much, but Florida's got to start to lock down Jacksonville and Tampa and Orlando, and you're not going to get everybody because, like you said, it's a very, very different recruiting landscape than it was in 2005 when Urban walked in. But you have to do a little bit better at keeping some
Mhm.
of that talent home. And to Napier's credit, I think he's done that to a certain extent, right? Like he's opened up the IMG pipeline, it seems like, and that's a place where Florida has really struggled to get talent out of in the past. So, like you said, it's July, it's still early. Um, but look, you got to tip your cap where and give credit where credit is due. Mario Cristobal is just recruiting really well right now. I mean, that's fact.
And he's a guy that I thought would, when the job first opened up, I thought if you're looking for a guy that's going to come in and recruit, because that seemed to be what all Florida fans wanted, there's your guy. He may have also got a head start on the NIL era by coaching in Oregon, where he's kind of used to that benefactor. But he signed the number 6 class at Oregon in 2021, so the guy's done it before, and he's also, I think the thing that is understated too is he's been recruiting some of these guys for 3 or 4 years now, because
Right.
Oregon recruits, they're kind
Oregon's
of going
recruiting nationally.
national.
Yep.
Yeah. So he's got a relationship with some of these guys already. And if you've ever heard him talk, I don't think Florida fans want to hear it. The guy is really engaging. Uh, I was at a coach's clinic with him and Napier both speaking. Cristobal, Napier was the noon guy. He had the biggest crowd. He was really thoughtful. I thought he was funny. I thought he was engaging as well, but a little more subdued, right? And
Yeah.
Cristobal is just energetic, just kind of constantly going. Different personalities, but I thought he would play well with recruits, and he obviously has his whole career.
Yeah, I
So
think I kind of see Billy Napier as more culture guy. Once he's got his culture established, it's going to kind of be that culture that sells. And I think that's kind of what Florida was looking for, right? They want something that's sustainable over the long haul. And I'm not saying that what Mario's doing at Miami necessarily won't be. I don't know that. But I think if you look at, Cristobal's track record, we kind of knew coming in he was going to
yeah.
recruit really well. And the question is, what can he do once he gets that talent? I think Billy Napier is going to be a little bit of a more of a slow burn in terms of the build, where you really got to establish the culture before you're going to necessarily see results just kind of piling up.
Yeah, and he's got time obviously to finish off this class. I seem to think that's kind of the biggest. Um, Recruiting is one of the bigger issues of the transition. Also, I wanted to ask you, since you were close to the program, how bad did it get? How much of a rebuilding is he going to have to do, kind of culturally inside the building? You mentioned culture; he's kind of big on that. How much did that start to wane, you thought, towards the end of the last season? And how much is that going to have to be something he rebuilds? Obviously, it's all going great, but we haven't played any games yet, so it's all good until you lose a game, right? So
That's the truth.
where do you think he's gonna, or how do you think he's doing there? What do you think needs to be done in that aspect?
Well, I think first off, I think as fanatics of college football, we do tend to overreact a little bit, right?
Mhm.
I don't really think the culture under Dan Mullen was that bad. Now, it definitely
Okay.
slipped. It definitely slipped. I think there were some things that happened in 2020 in the COVID offseason leading into that year, where I think Dan Mullen started to kind of lose his grip on the program. And I think, especially the refusal to make a change, in defensive coordinator after 2020 was something the fans really latched onto. And I thought you could clearly see last year in the play of the defense at various points that they kind of heard that and there were probably more guys on board with a change than not. And you saw that reflected in the play as things started to go south. And so, yeah, there's a little bit of that culture, I think, erosion that happened, but
Yeah.
I don't think that's necessarily hard to fix. I mean, you even look at some of the transfers out of the program. One or two of those were probably actually positives, despite the lack of or the loss of production. And so I think that's pretty easy to fix with a new coach, especially when you have a team that look. Florida was in the SEC title game only 2 years ago. I mean, they were competitive against Alabama in that game. Even last year, they come up in a 2-point conversion shy of Alabama. So these guys have had a taste of what it can be like to be successful and right there on the national stage. And I think with that comes a little bit of hunger to where a new coach walking in, selling a vision, selling culture, I think it clicks a lot quicker than maybe you might expect.
Yeah. It seems they seem to be bought in. Everybody seems to be saying the right thing. Has anything surprised you so far? I know, um, a lot of people thought there'd be a lot more attrition in terms of scholarships and guys transferring out. Has anything surprised you so far about the transition, or kind of come out of left field for you?
I think probably not. I don't know. I don't think there's anything that's been overly surprising. I do think one thing I've shifted on a little bit, and I said after Dan Mullen got fired, I didn't think this was a huge rebuild for Florida.
No.
I'm still not convinced it's a huge rebuild, but where I have come around a little bit, I don't think the talent is quite as good as maybe it looked on paper.
Yeah.
We referenced the two Alabama games. I think some of that is credit to Dan Mullen being really good with his offensive scheme. It's been a while since I've had this many question marks about, especially the receiver room at Florida, and they did a good job adding from the transfer portal there. But I just don't know, and I'm not necessarily deriding Florida's talent. I just don't know. It's a little less clear to me whether Florida, is kind of on the cusp talent wise, or it really needs an overhaul, and that's probably the biggest thing I'm not sure of right now.
Yeah, there's definitely kind of an air of mystery about the team, especially. It seems like the first group is pretty talented and is played, and you feel pretty good with. Beyond that, it's almost all question marks, and probably leaning towards uh, negative if you're a Florida fan. Um, what are you anticipating this year? Tough schedule, obviously. What are you anticipating um, from the team and in terms of performance, or just kind of general thoughts on the season? I know it's kind of a tough question
Yeah,
to ask.
well, this answer probably won't satisfy anyone, but frankly, I don't know. What I've
Well,
been saying all offseason is I think this Florida team in particular, more than most, is going to have a lot of variance in terms of
yeah,
possible outcomes. I mean, this is a team that could honestly, if things go poorly and the wrong guys get hurt, could struggle to win 6 games. On the flip side, if people stay healthy in the right spots and Anthony Richardson takes that next step, this team that could win 10 games. So I do think the schedule, as you pointed out, doesn't really do Billy Napier a whole lot of favors.
no,
On the flip side, it's going to be a year where momentum, I think, can really carry you or drag you down. I mean, if you come out and you lose the season opener to Utah, we've already talked about some of the uneasiness online
yeah,
with recruiting. I mean, you can imagine where that's going to go if you walk out the gates with a loss. And Utah's a really good team. On the flip side, you win that game, all of a sudden you get even more culture buy-in, and maybe you cruise through, and you get to Knoxville at 3-0, and all of a sudden, who knows? So I don't know. I don't know which one I'd bet on out of those possible
no.
outcomes, and
Well,
that's kind of the thing.
I think the line has been set dead in the middle. Or kind of the line's been set at 7. I think
Yeah, I'd
over
take
under win total.
over on 7, but
Well,
I mean it's tough.
yeah, there's a lot of love going out to Kentucky and South Carolina, and I think those definitely seem like games that were winnable for Florida last year, but for whatever reason
I don't
they
think you can
lost.
compare to last year. I mean, look, the South Carolina game, those guys were checked out. So,
Yeah, that
but those teams are getting better too.
yeah.
So,
So that'll be interesting. I one just kind of off, not quite off topic, but how did you feel like you timed your transition away from the message boards perfectly?
you're gonna get me in trouble answering that. Yes, it's been nice not having to check them and keep up. But no, I love message boards, man. I think look, they're awesome. The fact that fans are as engaged as they are is why I had a 10-year run in that career, and I couldn't be more grateful. But it's on another level right now.
So where do you feel like just back on? Do you feel like Napier is kind of? Do you think he is the guy? It's really hard to say, obviously, because there's so many different factors and things that could happen. But do you think his kind of demeanor? You think that's kind of what Florida needed and what can take them forward, or what do you think about kind of just in terms of the future of Florida football? I guess.
I think so. I go back to what I said earlier. I think the key in these high profile jobs like Florida is being able to accurately identify very early on when things are kind of going off the path a little bit and course correcting before you get to a point where it builds up to a fever pitch and a roar, like, Dan Mullen retaining Todd Grantham for that 4th season. I mean, look, the guy made his decision and he stuck behind it, and there's a certain admirable quality to that. But when you make those decisions and you double down, that you're
You get
now at the
fired.
mercy of
Yeah.
whether it works out, right?
Yeah.
So I think for Billy Napier, he's got a staff. I think one of my bigger concerns is that the majority of his staff has coached at a lower level and has not necessarily been on this SEC stage. A few guys obviously uh, have, but I think the key is going to be identifying and being able to make those tough decisions early on. But I think Billy Napier himself, I like him a lot, and I think that he is a very, very sharp guy. It's just going to be about, can he course correct the small things that need to be fixed quickly enough?
How did you feel like? How did you feel about the previous coach? Did you feel similarly, or was there any reservation with any of the previous guys?
Um, Jim McElwain, I very much felt like walked in with a staff that wasn't ready for the Florida spotlight, and I don't know that that ever really got corrected under him. So that was kind of an early warning sign, I think. For Dan Mullen, it was more so. I mean, his staff obviously had loads of SEC experience walking into the job. I think the issue there was more so that they'd been together so long and had done it at a place like Mississippi State so effectively at that stage
Mhm.
that they kind of thought it was going to equally translate to Florida. And so I think they were a little bit, again, too hesitant to make moves with some of these guys where they needed to improve. And then, for Mullen, very early on, it was evident that the recruiting organization was just not there. And some of the early hires that Dan Mullen made, Cordell Landers and Otis Yelverton and um, Frank Landers and some of those guys, it was a very sloppy organization the way it was run early on. And they did, in Mullen's defense, he did try to fix that and revamp that structure. But I think the lack of emphasis from him was pretty clear early on. And again, that's where I go back to. I think they kind of just thought what they did at Mississippi State would fully translate to Florida, and obviously Florida's a different beast.
Yeah, to me, I thought the receiver room was kind of a perfect encapsulation of that because he could not at Mississippi State. He had success with besides like Chad Bumphus, who was like in his first class. He had success with those bigger guys that were big outside guys that could kind of win 50-50 balls and things like that. And you'd see they'd go to the combine run like 4.9s.
Mhm.
So, but he had success with that type of bigger bodied receiver there. And it seemed like he's like, yeah, I've had success with this. I'll just keep recruiting those bigger bodied receivers, and did not kind of get that mix you need. And you see that kind of now with Florida. You got a bunch of bigger bodied outside guys, and you don't have a ton of guys with wiggle in the
Yeah,
slot.
yeah, that, and I think you could kind of see from his reliance on JUCO guys, especially on the offensive line at Mississippi State. That was kind of your warning sign that they're maybe not great recruiters and are having to go patchwork to fix holes on the roster. And I think we saw that at Florida with the transfer portal. And granted, they did it successfully at times. John Grenard was a huge addition from the transfer portal, and that really worked out well. But when you leave yourself having to do that, sometimes you run into years like 2020, 2021, where that defensive tackle, you take three guys from the portal and you're not getting SEC level production. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's just interesting to see how it kind of all unfolded there.
Yeah, that it was especially just the downfall. It was so fast and so sudden. Yeah, just going back and just even like the penalties doubled after that after the shoe toss. The penalties from there on doubled to what they were previously, doubled what his career marks had been. But yeah, that's kind of it was a wild end. I know if we were sitting here 2 years ago, we wouldn't be the thing we'd be discussing Billy Napier here.
Dude,
But
even 12 months
even
ago.
a year ago, yeah, it's how fast that. All right, so we'll finish up kind of general college football. Obviously, the big news is USC and UCLA going to the Big Ten. Another round of realignment expansion. What are your thoughts on that, just in general, and for college football?
I mean, I have mixed thoughts. I don't want to be old man, get off my lawn here, but there's a certain charm about college football that is based on regional matchups and preserving rivalries that have been around for 50, 100 years, where you get these just levels of intensity that I don't think are really matched in many other American sports. And I worry that, you know, pulling in a USC and a UCLA to the Big Ten, or, if the SEC tries to go west, like I worry that you're going to lose some of that. We've already seen, I think, some of that happen in the last round of realignment where the SEC didn't add extra conference games, and now you only go to some of these SEC West schools once every 12 years. To me, that's not cool. I mean, like Florida Auburn, that game should always happen more than once every 12 years on the road. Like fans need to experience that.
Yeah.
So I I think there's ways that they can chase the TV money, which is obviously what this is all about, without kind of losing some of that core spirit of college football. And what I think that boils down to scheduling mostly, I would say.
Yeah. No, it would seem to me, I always thought that, no, first going way back when Florida and Auburn stopped playing every year, that's when it kind of died a little bit to me because they played every year for a long time. And then schedules had to get moved around for this or that. And, I've got like a Sugar Bowl. It used to be a big deal to make the Sugar Bowl. They
Yeah.
used to be a really big deal. So that's kind of sad in turn and kind of just seeing how everything's moving. But on the other side of it, we're losing some of the, like you said, we're losing some of that kind of regional to the game. But there's also been two regions that have really invested,
Yeah.
and those are the two regions that are kind of scooping everybody up. What are you thinking in terms of SEC expansion? What do you think would kind of be the max, the optimal move for them? Do you think they need to go out to 20 and go way out, or what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it seems like that's where it's going to trend, especially, if the Big Ten, doesn't stop it. Say Notre Dame jumps on board and they try to go, even past that. I don't know. I would like to see if the SEC expands. I'd like to see it stay somewhat regional. I understand they need new TV markets, so pull in a Virginia Tech, maybe a Miami or an FSU comes over. I don't know. I think the whole thing is, there's obviously positives to it all too, right? Like I think the quality of games that fans are seeing on a weekly basis has really, really improved over at least the last 5 years. And I think you're seeing, ADs start to realize, and this has been going on for, like I said, at least 5 to 10 years now, that these fans don't want to roll into, town for 3 cupcake games a year. And so we've even seen that happen. I mean, Florida's hosting Utah this year. So I think there's definitely upside to it. I think the inventory of games is getting a lot better. I just, I think it needs to be done in a smart way, especially with the scheduling piece, to where, you get a chance to experience what makes college football special by visiting some of these venues.
Yeah, it seems like this could have been done. It's too late now, but this could have been done with just playoff expansion. But now the money part, I guess, is if the Pac-12 still had an automatic in, would their TV money be any better? Probably not. So
Yeah.
I guess some of this was possibly inevitable. But do you think I've seen Clemson, Florida State, and Miami as 3 teams to the SEC, and everyone seems to act like that would be a slam dunk. Do you think Florida won, and then the rest of the SEC would actually want Miami in the SEC? Wouldn't that kill a lot of their recruiting advantages down there?
I think it would hurt. I don't know if it would be overly detrimental. I do think Florida would be against those inclusions for the most part.
It'd be tough to get two in states.
But here's the give and take we're talking about, right? What fans of Florida, if you're not talking about the recruiting angle, would not want to play FSU and Miami more regularly? I guess Miami because they play Florida State every year, but I mean those are fun games, and fans get fired up for those games. So that's what I talk about when you stay regional and matchups that matter. Those are the kind of additions I think would be good for the SEC, rather than just trying to poach a new market by going out and, I don't know, plucking in Oregon or in Arizona or Arizona State or whatever. I think
I don't see how that works. Yeah, I think maybe get up into North Carolina and Virginia, like you said. There's some schools that you can take there, but I don't see a westward expansion. To me, I believe the SEC wants to kind of stay in their current footprint,
and it makes sense. I mean, that's where all the passion comes from, and ultimately, it's the passion and the viewership that drives the TV money. So I don't know. To me, it makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's all I've got. That's all the questions I have for you. I appreciate you coming on and talking about Florida football and then a little college football at the end. Where can people find you if you want them to find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Thomas Goldkamp. That's the only place I'm really doing anything right now. So I do appreciate you having me on, man. I really enjoyed watching your show for a while, and hopefully people like this.
Oh yeah, I'm sure everyone wants to hear from you. Your name's all over the message board. They want you to come back. So I'm sure this will be met with a lot of acclaim here. So I again appreciate you coming on. You can follow me on Twitter at Seth Varnadore. We post videos here every week. So if you like this, we'll be posting more stuff on Florida, especially as the season gets on. We'll post some scheme stuff because we'll actually have stuff to talk about then. Again, Thomas, thanks for coming on. Come back next week for more Florida and college football. Thanks.